So speaking of sort of manufacturing in Mansfield, where did your parents work? Can you tell us a little bit about
okay.
that?
Probably the best day that I can see my dad jump up and click his heels together was when he was hired at the Westinghouse.
Okay.
That saved Mansfield.
Mm.
That brought us out of the Depression.
Okay. And what? So that was they had opened the plant, or this was just him getting the job there? This was
Well, they built a plant.
Okay.
Right? And then they started to hire.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where he stood in that line, but
Yeah.
he worked there for years. He worked
Okay.
for 30 years for
And did he start there when they opened the doors? Was that, or shortly thereafter?
shortly
or?
thereafter.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
remember what time period that was at all?
That would
or-
have been, let me see, I would have been 10. He would have started there in 34.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay. And then your mother, was she a homemaker? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
she never worked outside the home.
Okay.
Mhm.
What about you, Mrs. Carr?
My dad worked at the brass all his life.
Okay.
And of course, my mom was a homemaker, and she was famous for the German strudel.
Mm.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I remember the neighbor kid, he's a preacher now, I go to church with him, and he said he used to go out in the backyard, and Mom used to come out and hand him some good stuff to eat all the time.
Mhm.
That's how I remembered my mom. She always gave stuff to everybody. She was very, very nice.
Did either of your fathers ever give you, tell you about the work that they were doing or what it was like give?
My dad was so thrilled to be working. Yes, and he talked about it a lot
Mhm.
at the supper table. Okay, we had, I don't know that this happens now because that doesn't even happen in my house because of the way the kids work,
Mhm.
right? But we all sat at the table at the same time.
Yes.
And you better be there, or you better have a darn good excuse why you're not there. And that was the whole time, the whole conversation of the day took place.
Mhm.
Mhm. And yes, he would talk about people he met, the kind of work he was doing, and he was doing buffing and plating then. And then every once in a while they'd be sent to another department, you know. And it never, when it really took off was during the war.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And it just boomed. It just boomed.
Now, did they? Now, this might seem like an odd question, but did they drive to work? Did they walk
Oh,
to
no, my
work?
dad-
How did that?
No,
I
my
mean-
dad walked.
Okay, so you
Yeah,
just they would
yeah.
walk from
Yeah.
the north end down to the.
Right, yeah.
And I mean that was
Yeah, no
that's
problem.
considered the flats even here in Mansfield, right? This
Yes.
area.
Yeah, mhm, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they would cut across. My dad would come down to where the granary is,
Mhm.
and he would walk the tracks, and all the guys did, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
walked the tracks over.
Walk the tracks over.
And then
yeah.
when they got to 4th Street, then they would be
Mhm.
at work.
Okay. So I'm picturing in my mind this sort of exodus of workers coming out in the morning and everybody walking down. Is that?
Yeah.
Right,
They
no,
walk.
that's how it was.
Yeah.
You would see them pass your house.
Uh-huh.
You knew they were going to work, some to Humphreys,
Uh-huh.
some to Tappin's, mostly to Westinghouse. And it's the same way when my dad went to, worked at the reformatory. All the guys did, you know. And, well, not all of them, but the ones that could. And they would walk down with their burlap bags to the granary. And then a bus would come along or a truck or whatever and pick them up and take them out, but they didn't bring them back. They had to walk back,
Wow. It's quite a hike.
carrying whatever they had.
Mhm.
And I remember as kids, my dad would always say, pretty soon, we say, Dad, will the fruit never get ripe? Because we were so tired of turnips and spinach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they would go and they'd have apples and peaches, and we all were healthy.
Mhm.
We
So
all
what
were
was
healthy.
a typical meal, like a Monday night dinner?
Whatever
Well,
you had.
Whatever
Yeah,
the-
it's hard to
Whatever you
say,
had.
it's hard to say. If Mom had a little bit of meat,
Mhm.
which she would never have an enormous amount of
Yeah.
meat, she would make stew,
Okay.
or she would make soup, so that so all 10 of you would get some nourishment from that. We ate a lot of beans, a lot of rice, a lot of potatoes. I still will give my soul for a pan of fried potatoes. And we made a lot of mush. We ate that, and we ate all kinds of vegetables. There was no kind of vegetables that my mother would not prepare. And we all picked berries, and and my mom canned anything that she could get her hands on.
Mhm.
But there was not a lot of meat, and
Yeah.
there was a dairy out on Bowman Street, almost to Longview, and it was called Wilson's.
Yes.
Okay, and my mother would say to one of us, either myself or my brother, who's a couple years older than me, it's your turn to go get the milk. She would hand us a gallon jug, and if you went out to Wilson's Dairy, they would give you free skim milk. So we would both go.
Yeah.
Hard to beat that.
Yeah,
Yes.
we would get skim
Yes.
milk, and they would give you free buttermilk. Okay, and their other milk would be like 5 cents a gallon. Well, we did not always have 5 cents a gallon. So my mother would take the buttermilk, and she would take like cheesecloth, and she would put it in the cheesecloth, then you all had to take your
Yeah.
turn
Yeah,
squeezing
squeeze it, hang it up.
hang it up on like even the clothes length,
Yeah.
and just squeeze it.
Squeeze
They
it.
made cottage cheese.
Yeah, that's how you make cottage
Mhm.
cheese.
And it was good too.
Oh, yeah.
Better than you can get now. And then there was a bakery called Yuli's Bakery, and you could get bread that was like not 1 day old, but like 2 or 3 days old. And we didn't buy a lot of bread because my mother baked every day. But once in a while, she would say, see if they have any 3-day-old cinnamon rolls, right? And then she would make like a dessert out of that. Mhm. Mix it with the skim milk and
Yeah.
eggs if you had some. And my mom was a very good cook.
Yeah.
I still cook like my mother.
Yeah. Sounds
Only
like
richer.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone said that about me, that if Betty was on death row and they asked her what would be her last meal, she'd say she wants a pound of butter and a bowl of gravy.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause my mom cooked German,
Mhm.
and I can't explain all the stuff she cooked,
Mhm.
but it was always really good.
Yeah.
And we used to go to a farm and when they butchered, we get a half a hog. And we used to butcher at home. And
You were
yeah.
rich.
Well, I don't know. And we used to cut up the fat and make lard,
Mhm.
Mhm.
drain it. And then I still have the press to make sausage. You clean the insides of the pig.
Yeah.
That was a job. Mom and I
Yeah,
used
I
to
know,
scrape them
yeah.
and clean them and wash.
It was crying time.
And then, use them, and we used to make the sausage. And a relation of mine lived, my mom's the old guy, every time we butchered, he would bring a bottle of wine up, and he'd come up and he would help butcher. And we'd grind up all this meat for sausage and put it in a big pan. We had to mix it. So they used to get my oldest son, he wasn't so old then, and they used to put a nickel in there, and he had to mix and mix till he found that
Oh,
nickel.
boy.
And then it was mixed good enough.
Mhm.
And then we would can meat. We would can sausage. And later on, when my husband and I we used to go camping all the time, or travel all over. And we used to take the canned sausage, cut it in pieces, when you put it in the cans, and a loaf of bread. And one time we took my dad with us after Mom passed away. He'd never been outside of Mansfield, really.
Mhm.
And we was out west. And we'd stop and eat lunch, and we'd open up a canned sausage, because he was there, and have bread and that was our lunch.
Mhm.
And we really enjoyed it. We really did. And I still, now I quit canning finally,
Yeah.
by myself.
Chris, did your dad have a job during the Depression?
Yeah, he was at,
Well, that's
at
it.
the
When we're,
at the press.
excuse me, when we're talking, it sounds to me like like he must have had.
Yeah, he worked all the time. He was never laid off.
Mhm. Well, my dad got laid off at Tappan's, and once you were laid off one place, you could look till forever. There was no one else hiring.
So that was during the Depression?
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So then was it a situation where he was laid off and then got back in as things got better, or was that?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't, because it took them so long to reestablish themselves,
Mhm.
that he went to the Westinghouse instead.
Oh, okay, so he,
Yeah.
okay, I see. He went from Tappan to the
Mhm.
Westinghouse.
But there was there was like 4 years in between there.
And was that when he was going out to the reformatory and doing that
he would
work?
He would do any day labor that he could do.
I see.
There was no such thing as walking up and getting a job.
Yeah,
I mean, there was no place to apply.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, now you've touched on this a little bit. You both have told us where you went to school. Now, Mrs. Bautz, did you graduate from St. Peter's then? Did you
No,
go
I
all the way
graduated
through?
from senior high.
You did. What year was that?
45.
Okay, and did you just go to high school then at senior high, or
I
how
went
did
to
that
senior
work?
high, and I did a little bit of college.
Okay,
And then, actually, my life turned out very, very well. I've been to every state.
wow.
I worked in Alaska. After my husband died, I went to Alaska and I worked on the fishing crew. I was hired to work on a fishing crew and a freelance writing.
Hmm.
So I published also in Alaska.
Wow.
Hardest work in the world,
Yeah, I
but
imagine.
the most worthy.
That's great. And Mrs. Carr, you said you attended Bowman Street School. Was it?
Yes.
It was Bowman Street, not
Yes.
Creveling at that
No,
time?
it was Bowman, yeah.
Okay. And then tell us about your school life in Mansfield. When did you graduate from senior high?
48, and that was it. And I got married a year and a half later.
Okay.
And-
That's what nearly all the girls did.
Yeah.
Yes. And talking about that, I want to tell you about the guy I married. He was from the North End.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1950, they changed the school name to Creveling.
Creveling. Okay.
So in '83, we got to wondering where all these people were that we played with.
Mm-hmm.
So we started the North End reunion. And we, everybody we could think of, and everybody asked somebody else, that lived out there before 1950.
Mm-hmm.
And one year we went out to the fairgrounds, and we had 800 people
Yeah.
there. I'm not kidding you. And everybody comes all the time.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
the most amazing thing is we took a covered dish, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Can you imagine 800 people bringing a covered dish?
Yeah, who
Wow.
brought a covered dish to that.
You walked in there and you went,
That's
It
amazing.
was, yeah, it was, yeah, and we went, then after that, we went to different places, I think.
well, it dwindled after
Yeah,
that, so, yeah.
And then, one year, it was Flag Day. So he was in the Air National Guard. So the Air National Guard came out and did a flag presentation and stuff for us and everything. And we always had a great time. We had it every year. And then when I quit it 2 years ago, after he passed away, and for me to do it alone, and people were getting too old, living too
Yeah.
far away and stuff.
Yeah.
So I sort of said, well, let's just quit it. And I hope I did the right thing.
No, you did the right thing, just at the right time.
Yeah, but
Yes.
we always had a great time. That
That's
was
great.
But people came from all over the United States.
Yes, they did.
Mhm.
Yes,
I
they
mean,
did.
And when they got here, it was just like you saw them yesterday.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
they were
was
just
an
like-
amazing
yeah.
thing. Like you go to a class reunion, and people are friendly and they're nice, But this was, people were just overjoyed to see each other.
Oh, yes.
And they were all glad to see that the other one had done well, which was a nice thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, we really did it,
Mhm.
yeah, did it in.
But you worked and you worked hard. Mhm.
Oh, we had a great time, though.
Mhm.
We had a great
No,
time.
it was good. Mhm.
That's great.
Yeah.
And,
I've got stuff in that book
and the
about
amazing
it.
thing about it was, other parts of towns tried to start the same thing.
Didn't
And
work.
for some reason, it didn't click in the other parts of town. It
Didn't
does
work.
not stand to reason why it didn't, but it never did. And people would try to come, they would come from up in Woodland, and they had never lived in the North End.
We kicked them out.
And they would come out and they'd say, well, no, you had to be, a resident of during these years.
Mhm.
And you get all kinds of phone calls where people would say, couldn't you just squeeze me in? And we'd say,
No.
well, we can't squeeze you in, and not, that it wasn't like an open
Mhm.
thing. It
We
was
even
actually,
had colored people come.
pardon?
We even had colored people come.
Well, they were from the North End.
Well,
Yeah.
Black, he used to help out.
Sure.
DeLarcy Black used to come. And
And Joe Clemens always
He
came.
came,
Mhm.
and I forget who the woman was that always came. But we even had black people come to this thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, anybody that lived in the North End
So
during
Went
this
to
period
Bowman
of
Street
time
School.
were welcome.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was folks that went, I was going to ask you
Went
basically,
to Bowman Street School.
so that was the criteria,
Yeah,
that
that
you
was
had
it.
attended Bowman Street School?
Yeah.
Area.
Because I know that's one thing we found is talking to various people, the definition of what the North End is changes a little bit depending on who you talk to.
Right,
I
yes.
mean, like I told you, I think I mentioned, we basically say north of Park Avenue, Main
Yeah.
and Trimble, but that's for our funders' purposes, they call
Right.
it that, but.
Actually, 6th Street was the dividing line between Bowman Street School and West Fifth.
West Fifth, okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you go to attend John Simpson then?
Yeah.
That's, okay. And then on to senior high
Mhm.
from
Yeah,
there?
that's how the circuit
Yeah.
went.
Okay. Now, I just want to, you mentioned this already, I just want to reiterate, you had mentioned the segregation at Bowman Street School.
Yes.
Now, you said that, was there like one classroom for blacks up on the second
Well,
floor? Was that the idea?
I never
or-
really knew, but I knew they were there, and I used to say hello to the teacher if she passed me.
Mhm. That was a black teacher?
Yes,
Correct?
yes,
Okay,
I could
okay.
still
Perhaps
see her.
there was more than one room, because there were many blacks that went there. I would have thought, I don't know that for
I
sure,
don't know.
but there may have been a couple,
Okay.
because there was a lot of kids.
Yeah, and we've talked to a few people that have told us similar things, but nobody's given us the amount of detail that you ladies have given us in terms of the sort of the lengths that they went to keep you guys separate.
Right.
You know, and one thing from talking to some of the black elders, they didn't really even know. They were little kids, they
Yeah.
didn't
Wouldn't
really
have.
think much
No,
of it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
You know.
that's right.
And it was part of their livelihood, so it would have been a natural thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, so that forgive me for sort of belaboring this point, but so you really had no interaction, but you would see, oh, there's the black students, like you said,
Well,
going
I
up.
never really seen the kids,
So-
but I knew they were there, and I saw the teacher
Yeah.
coming down the steps a lot.
But like you'd never do recess together.
No, no,
hence
no,
the
no,
segregation.
no,
there
You were
was
kept
no
apart.
interaction.
No
No,
interaction.
No
Okay.
interaction.
Okay.
Mhm. But then when you got to Simpson,
There was some.
there was no segregation at Simpson. Well, except that if people segregated
Yeah.
themselves.
Self-segregation.
I mean, there was no forced segregation.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, we have also heard things like that early on at the Friendly House, like I think they had kindergarten classes and things,
Mm-hmm.
that those were segregated. Do you know anything about that at all?
They may
or-
have been, I'm not sure.
Well, I believe somebody mentioned that the kindergarten, everybody was, mixed up. Everybody went to school together as kindergartners, and after that is
Was-
when they were
was
split.
that
I
what it
believe
was?
is
Like
what it
That
was.
could be so,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't
Who
know.
went there.